going to spend some time now in Philippians chapter 3, verses 3:1 to 4:1. There's about 20 verses, so if you'd like to pause the video, just have a bit of a look through. You can get a bit of an understanding of what the verses are about. This is actually quite a powerful passage as well, and there's another one of those spokes that comes off that hub of verses 5 to 11 in chapter 2. Paul says, rejoice, rejoice, because this is a safeguard for you. Rejoice. How can rejoicing be a safeguard? Now, if you remember earlier, he was talking about grumbling and complaining. Now, if you rejoice, it's pretty hard to grumble and complain. Now, look, I'm English. Unfortunately, we have a reputation for complaining and moaning and grumbling. But I know from personal experience that if I'm rejoicing, then it's very difficult to complain and moan because I'm enjoying it. If I rejoice, I'm saying God is in control, that I'm trusting him. And so I'll look for the positives. And in fact, what happens is I actually create the positives around me. Paul's rejoicing is more than simply an attitude of gratitude. It's about a deep-centered trust of what God has done and a satisfaction that God is in control. That stems from his relationship with Jesus Christ. He's rejoicing in something which, despite overwhelming circumstances, he has peace. It's based again on the fact that God is sovereign. Paul has a deep understanding of this. This is beyond our circumstances. So what else can we do apart from rejoice? Because we know that he is in control. And don't forget, again, that Paul's potentially facing execution. So let's not downplay this at all. He goes on to talk about his CV or his resume. And we often think that a resume is actually really significant because it's about this world. And Paul's list is really extensive, which actually puts him in the elite of the elite for the Hebrews. In verse 7, he actually considers all of this absolute rubbish, garbage. In fact, actually the word used and the concept word is actually quite a confronting concept. This stuff, which has been so significant in his life, is now regarded as completely insignificant. Now, if I had a certificate 3, I'd be pretty cool, pretty excited by that. And then if I do some more study, I get a diploma and I actually forget the certificate 3 because, wow, I've got a diploma now. And if I keep on going, I get a degree, I'll go, wow, I forget my certificate 3, my diploma, because now I've got a degree. This is great. But what I've done is actually done something more significant in doing my degree than I did in the other stuff. Now, Paul had an experience with Jesus Christ. So for him to live as Christ is gain. In verse 9, he wants to be found in Christ. He wants to have the righteousness that can only come from Christ. He wants to know the power of Christ's righteousness in his life. He wants to participate in Christ's sufferings. I'm not sure that too many of us want to do that, but he wants to become more like him. He wants to take hold of all that stuff that Christ has got hold of and already taken for him, and he wants that. Now, he says he hasn't already attained it while he's still alive, but he sees that what Christ has done for him is far greater than all that stuff that he's done. Now, I'll tell you what, that is perspective. That's putting things into a context. And finally, in verse 15, in putting a challenge out to the others, he says, this is my approach. If you're mature, you should think the same thing. You should have the same attitude that I have. Why? Because Paul has got perspective. He reminds us that we have already attained this, even though we're still alive, but we have already attained this. Christ has already got it. The reality is that what we need to do is to work that out. We need to live that. In verse 18, he acknowledges, though, that many people have tasted the gospel and now become enemies of the gospel. And that brings him to tears. Why? Because they're pursuing their own interests, their own selfish desires. To be honest, that brings me to tears as well. Because when I look at Christians that have had a taste of Christian faith, that they've put their foot in the water, but they haven't trusted themselves to Jesus, it's just disappointed me that they move away from church and move away from a relationship with Jesus. And I guess it shows to me that they haven't really understood what that's about. This amazing relationship is something that everybody can grasp. In verse 20, Paul reminds them that their citizenship is in Jesus. It's in the kingdom of heaven. You see, he was drawing on the Philippians' understanding of what Roman citizenship was all about, being a part of Philippians. And so he says to the Philippians that their citizenship is actually in heaven. And so as citizens of heaven, they have all the benefits of heaven. Their citizenship is not of this world. A number of years ago, I had the privilege of spending some time with some Bhutanese people. Now, in the 1990s, around about 100,000 of them who had come from Nepal and moved over to Bhutan about 300 years previously had been forcibly removed from Bhutan. And they and Australia accepted a whole raft of them, quite a few thousand, and quite a few of them stayed north of Adelaide. Now, I went to a citizen ceremony that they had, and there was about 150, 160 of these Bhutanese folks becoming Australian citizens. And the joy which they experienced, they just loved it. They just thought it was absolutely fantastic because at last a country wanted them. They'd come from one country, gone to another, neither of those wanted them. So they came to Australia and we accepted them for who they were. They felt incredibly privileged. Well, our citizenship is in heaven. We should also feel privileged. So I want to ask you some questions. Have you made a decision for Jesus, to follow Jesus Christ? Where's your citizenship? Is it in heaven? Have you acknowledged that Jesus died on the cross, that he died so that you could enter into a relationship with him? And if you've done that, then are you living up to what Jesus has already attained for you? Are you living up to what he has won on the cross for you? Are you living up to the fact that your citizenship is now in heaven? Some words from Paul to think about in Philippians. So have a good think.